All right. Hi, everybody. Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi. Did we have a nice break? Everybody had a refreshment, a water, a beverage? Good, good. So, I want to welcome everybody to our next panel, which is Building Bipartisan Support for SNAP and Medicaid. And this panel, or the purpose of it, is the preparing for your lobby visit. So, Millie and I just did what exactly is our ask. But now we're going to get the details on more of your questions about what to talk to with congressional staffs because we have a brilliant panel here today. So first we have Meredith Dotson is a Senior Director of Public Policy at the Coalition of Human Needs, an alliance of national organizations working together to promote public policies which address the needs of low-income and other vulnerable populations. Meredith coordinates CHN's advocacy campaigns on Capitol Hill and with the executive branch, including chairing regular information sharing meetings for coalition partners, tracking priority legislations, direct lobbying on behalf of CHN, and local advocates in legislative Hill work. Prior to her work at CHN, Meredith has spent over 24 years at Results, a grassroots anti poverty organization serving as director of Results USA poverty policy work, overseeing Results legislative and coalition work on budget and tax policy, affordable housing, anti hunger programs, health policies, and other U.S. anti poverty initiatives. She's amazing. She works directly with Results grassroots networks, training and supporting Results volunteers all over the country, building support with members of Congress and their staff, generate local media, and network with local community groups and other allies. Give it a round for Meredith Dawson, everybody. And next, we have an equally stunning panelist. Bob Powers is Director of Government Relations at Bread for the World, a Christian advocacy organization urging U.S. decision makers to do all they can to pursue a world without hunger. Bob is a leader, political, and former diplomat with 20 years of experience in Washington, D.C. This work includes his efforts in private industries, large corporations, government and associations, and now at Bread for the World. He has built government affairs and sales operations from the ground up and has successfully implemented new multilateral processes while serving as an appointee for USAID. He is a passionate about issues. Oh, I heard a ooh. Yes, ooh. He is passionate about issues revolving around food insecurity, hunger, humanitarian efforts, both domestically and globally. So give it up for Bob Powers. Yes. So, just to give context and ground everybody again, as a reminder, SNAP is a federal nutrition assistance program that helps 40 million people put food on the table, and Medicaid provides health coverage to over 70 million people. And then you're going to ask your members of Congress Tuesday to what? No group unison? Y'all can do better than that. Oppose cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and budget reconciliation. Yes, yes. So there are a number of proposals out there to cut Medicaid and SNAP. And Meredith, could you start off by explaining just what are some of these proposals to Medicaid and what would they do?
Okay, great. Can you hear me? All right. It is such an honor to be in this room with all of you. And I know that it took a lot in your lives, whether work, school, family, etc., to be here. So I actually wanted to start with that because it's really inspiring to me. Not what you expect, not what people think is happening typically on a Sunday morning. So anyway, in terms of what's on the table with Medicaid cuts and what that would mean. So as you probably heard Congress on the House side in crafting a budget resolution, they have proposed $880 billion in cuts, kind of assigning it. It's almost like homework where they assign that amount of savings to the committee that has jurisdiction over Medicaid. It's called the Energy and Commerce Committee, in case any of you end up meeting with members of that committee. They're the ones who will eventually have the homework of writing that part of budget reconciliation. And the Congressional Budget Office found there's no way for them to make those kinds of cuts without cutting Medicaid. So I know you all heard already about the importance of Medicaid. Many of us know firsthand for ourselves or for family members how important Medicaid is, whether it's for children, for people with disabilities, for low-income seniors. It might not be called Medicaid, by the way, but there's no way to cut $880 billion or hundreds of billions of dollars, even if they scale it back, from Medicaid without really jeopardizing both access and quality of care. And then there's a ripple effect. So some of the things that are on the table, and you all have talked about this some already, is kind of potentially trying to hide what these cuts mean by kind of passing off responsibility for Medicaid and also for SNAP. We'll talk more about that, I imagine. By shifting costs to the states. It's a radical new proposal in terms of SNAP because benefit levels have never been covered by states before. But also it's something that's very much in play in terms of Medicaid. Maybe changing overall the amount that the federal government pays for health coverage for millions of people, or maybe changing it just for Medicaid expansion. So for those of you, most of you probably live in states that expanded Medicaid after the Affordable Care Act. Really important for health coverage, especially for adults, including young adults. And also, by the way, that Medicaid expansion is very important for kind of reducing health disparities by race and ethnicity and increasing health coverage. So that's one of the things we might see is changing, overall the percentage that the federal government pays in terms of Medicaid, or capping it for certain populations. That's a per capita cap. Another thing, which I imagine you did talk about, is work requirements. And I will say, I know many of you are probably familiar with kind of the racist history of work reporting requirements. And I think we should, in our own conversations, acknowledge that and acknowledge kind of where some of those attacks are coming from. So, and the one last thing I just want to mention is that there's often a ripple effect with these kind of cuts. So, for example, in terms of access to Medicaid, if families lose access to Medicaid, that could mean they lose access, or there's a bunch of extra paperwork for folks to qualify for WIC or for school meals. So it also impacts access to nutrition because states right now use eligibility for Medicaid and SNAP to determine eligibility for other programs. It could impact access for children in school-based settings because there's a lot of Medicaid in schools. There's a lot of programming and support that happens for children with disabilities in school settings because of Medicaid cuts. So those are a couple of things I thought I would just lift up initially in this conversation.
Yes, and thank you for bringing up the intersectionality point and the ripple effect point. And Bob, can you talk about what are the proposed cuts to SNAP? What are they and what could be the impact of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody can hear me as well? Yeah, awesome. So, at Bread for the World, we work with FCNL all the time, and Meredith. We're up on the Hill lobbying all the time. We really care passionately about hunger. In fact, our number one issue is hunger, and making that solvable, ending hunger in our lifetime. And we really do believe that's possible. I wish I could talk a little bit on the international side as well, but we're here for the domestic. But my heart really is hunger spots all over the world and here domestically. SNAP is one of the biggest ways to fight hunger domestically. And as Meredith alluded to a little bit ago, and again, that's the supplement nutrition assistance program. And Meredith alluded a little bit ago that with all the cuts this new administration is requiring, each chairman over a committee in the House has been tasked with coming up with these savings. And on SNAP, it's $230 billion. Billion, not million, $1 billion. That's a lot of money. What we do know is that the chairman of in the House has promised that there wasn't going to be any cuts. But everybody is thinking that's a lot of money. Where the cut's going to come from? And so our biggest concern is that's going to be SNAP, that's going to be Medicaid. That's why you're all here today. And I love that there's so many of you because it's so important at this time. So that is the big number, $230 billion. And so we're watching that closely. If these cuts were to become real, that could mean stricter eligibility requirements, reduced benefits for many households, potentially removing entire groups that Meredith already mentioned, or like working families and older adults. So we're really watching this closely. We're really concerned. I'm not going to get into the other question a little bit, why they're saying these cuts are necessary. I'm saving that for now. But you know, this really is, you know, Bread for the World, FCNL, we're all working to warn lawmakers that this really could reverse progress in the fight to end hunger. And so it really is a crucial time to take to the Hill and emphasize why these programs are so important, and your voice is needed more than ever.
Yeah, you gave me the perfect segue of why are these cuts being made. So Bob, we can start off with you.
Great. So the number one reason is, again, on the Republican side, they're saying that they're looking at right-sizing government, and the deficit has gotten very large, and so therefore we have to trim back the budget on things. And one of the things we'll say is, and I know my friends on the stage would agree, is yeah, I think there is legitimately a lot of waste, a lot of fraud to go after. There's overspending in every department, and go after those things, but don't affect the things that are helping people the most, which is food aid, which is SNAP, and some of the things we're going to talk about. So really limiting these benefits, I think, could cause a lot of other ripple effects that were already mentioned, and that's a concern. But that is the number one reason. And then the other argument we're hearing, at least on the federal budget, is, you know, these cuts are necessary, trim it down, yada, yada. And also that some of the states have really big coffers right now. That means, like, you know, they're saying that their nutrition money, set aside money, is quite large, so they don't need the federal government money, that they have the money to pay for these programs. And I think a lot of the states would argue with that point and say that they still need the federal assistance.
Yeah. So Meredith, if you want to respond back to why we're seeing these cuts.
I do think that so to be fair, one of the reasons why we're here, why your work is so important, I think that if Congress wasn't in the process of doing this larger budget package and looking to kind of use the reconciliation process to fast track budget changes and fast track tax policies, that is kind of the bigger why are we here right now. That is what part of what's happening right now. So then in terms of some of the specific kind of justifications that are being used, one is kind of that, states need to be picking up more of the tab. But I think that there's a misunderstanding, because more and more, most state budgets are really tight, and states are looking in a lot of places to make cuts to education. They're cutting public health services. They're cutting a lot of other investments. And then this comes at a moment that for the majority of states, they're already kind of feeling squeezed. And then there's a lot of kind of waste, fraud, and abuse. But it's really hard for me. There is no reality-based world where there is $230 billion in food assistance helping people put food on the table that can be in the name of waste, fraud, and abuse. There is not that kind of waste in the SNAP program. Similarly, $880 billion in Medicaid. That is not, I'm often meeting with policymakers, and they're kind of talking about, we're really interested in identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. Trust me, there is not $880 billion in health services going for low-income children, people with disabilities, low-income seniors in nursing homes, and other folks who are getting home and community-based services. There's not $880 billion worth of that in the Medicaid program. So those are two of the places. And I would say, if we've got concerns about how programs are being implemented, we need to be really careful not to punish people at the margins, not to take food away from them, not to take healthcare away from them, just because you don't like how programs are being administered. And that's unfortunately kind of what's at stake right now. The last thing I will flag is often when when some politicians talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, they're actually referring to immigrant access to these programs because they don't understand how already hard it is for immigrants to get access to these services. There's a bar often for 5 years. You have to be legally present in the country to get any form of access. So again, there's not $1 trillion worth of benefits going to immigrant and mixed status communities in these programs. So but know that often, even if they don't say it out loud, I think there's some policymakers who don't understand eligibility for these programs and think that there's a lot of folks in immigrant communities who are accessing programs when honestly they're not, because they're not eligible with the way that the policies are structured.
Yes, I'm so glad that you touched on that. And I guess everybody can tell from your bios, you're often on the Hill doing meetings. And we have had questions about how do we get in mind of members of Congress and staffers. So my next question for you is for the people in the room who are going to meet with Republican offices, what should they prepare in their toolbox for that discussion? And how should they respond to anything they might hear for pushbacks or threats?
Yeah, so I did touch on some of it, which is I think you'll hear people thinking, oh, there must be hundreds of billions of dollars in wasteful spending that we just have to find it and then go after that and we won't actually harm folks. I think there are some people who think that that's out there. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but it's not nearly at the scale of the cuts that they're considering right now. And I think this is where you all, especially as constituents, as their employers, can actually ask, like, help me understand this better. What are some examples that you're hearing about of waste, fraud, and abuse? Are you hearing from state officials about, tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars worth of waste, fraud, and abuse? Because I don't understand where this is coming from. You can actually say that. In some ways, you can say it in the way that we can't say it because there's an accountability for you all. Another thing I think you're going to hear, and I've been hearing a lot from these offices, specifically on Medicaid, is, don't worry, I'm protecting the core population. So, there's kind of an idea that somehow you can take hundreds of billions of dollars away from SNAP or Medicaid and not impact access for low-income children for health services, or not impact their access for food. Same with people with disabilities or seniors. There's a lot of don't worry. And it might be that, officially, there's not, tens of millions of children who lose access to healthcare through Medicaid. But one of the things that you all are really, I think, well positioned to do is talk about children come in families and families come in community. And if for instance, if their parents lose access to health coverage or their parents lose access to SNAP benefits, that impacts the whole family. And that actually impacts my whole community. If you're from a rural area, and a lot of folks lose access to Medicaid, it's going to close even more hospitals and service providers in your community. So we're doing harm. We can be harming the populations that theoretically we're claiming to protect. And I think it's important for you all to talk about as folks who can speak from your own lived expertise, who can speak about the experience you have in communities. And knowing the communities back home, you all can bring that and really talk about how there's kind of an ecosystem back home and you can't really kind of protect folks from wide scale cuts to health and food assistance. But Bob probably has more to add on that too.
Yeah, glad to add in on this on Republican offices. So first of all, realizing this is many of your first time on the Hill. And it can be a little scary and a little intimidating. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But just have fun with it. Number one, I would just say enjoy your day on Capitol Hill. Meredith and I have been doing this for eons. I've been here for 25 years on the Hill. And we can deal with all the hardcore stuff. But I think one of the most important things is You know, I say one of my secret weapons is no matter what I'm doing, especially on the Hill, is diplomacy. And simply meaning, you put kindness into what you're doing and what you're sharing, and that all of you have a story, I think, and you might want to be thinking a little bit about that. Maybe what your mom went through, your dad went through, your grandma, and how you're talking about things, and common sense things. On the conservative side, which we're talking about right now, Republicans, they care about fiscal conservative things, life issues big for them. And so, one of the things I love to lead off with is we really care about a person's entire life, and hunger is a big problem. And we think helping solve the hunger problem for kids, for families, is really a life issue. And we want to see, people flourish in every area of life. And that's always a good place to start too, is seeing how people can flourish in the different areas. And I was talking in one Republican office just on Friday, a chief of staff, and we were talking about SNAP. And I said, there's some concerns right now using that tone with major cuts to SNAP. And I said, that's really concerning to a lot of people. And he said, yeah, I know. My grandma's on the cusp of whether or not that she can continue to receive SNAP benefits. And here's why she's on the cusp, and here's why it's a worry for her. And so just by opening up a little bit, we had some common ground there and a good discussion. And then for us, there's actually a hunger caucus on Capitol Hill that both Republicans and Democrat members are involved in. And, my next thing was, well, gosh, your boss should be in the hunger caucus. And, there's a dear colleague letter going out soon. So that's a little bit more, but that's just ways of engaging, is, sharing your story, or this is why it was so crucial for our family, or, hey, we're in a food, we're like in a food desert and there's no grocery stores here. And SNAP is really important to my family. So that's a great way to do it. And then there are other areas, again, Brett, we really focus on hunger hotspots all over the world. Internationally, we know there's 27 that were really like Sudan and Gaza. But here at home, we're talking about domestic issues. There's hunger hotspots here. If you look at like North Carolina right now, that's still recovering. Whoever would have thought that a hurricane would hit the mountains of North Carolina? Anybody from that region? Can I just ask? Okay, so you all know, and it's still recovering. The food pantries were wiped out, and getting aid into those areas is really difficult. So that's another personal story of, hey, this SNAP can really help our community right now, and food pantries are crucial. You really need to talk about food pantries right now. We're not talking about that, but some funding is being cut to get food into food pantries and that kind of thing. So I just really think telling those personal stories, finding that common ground, and just telling your why, basically.
Amazing. And what would both of you say our lovely people would need for their toolbox for Democratic offices? What pushbacks do you expect for them to hear, how to respond to that, and even if somebody is more engaged with the issues, how to push them even further to be more vocal about it?
I would say, from talking with results volunteer advocates who were meeting with members of Congress over multiple decades, one of the things you often hear from the minority party in the House, whoever it is, we can't influence that. If the majority is in charge, and, we're kind of washing our hands, we're absolved of anything. And trust me, I've heard that. I've been in meetings, hundreds of meetings with constituents who have been told that from folks on both sides of the aisle. So that's not like that's just the Democrats right now are in the minority in the House. So they're the ones who might say that right now, but that is kind of a recurring theme. And I do think, and so in the first place, I would say, there's a lot of ways that we as individuals and them as policymakers can be sounding the alarm. They can be talking about this. For instance, when there's a committee hearing or, other events, floor debate. For example, it looks like the Senate Agriculture Committee in a couple of weeks is going to have a hearing about, kind of the school standards and school meals. But, I just mentioned how cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP will make it harder for some families to access school meals. There's a chance for Democrats on the Senate Agriculture Committee and Republicans on the Senate Agriculture Committee to be connecting the dots there. Like if we're talking about access to healthy food and school meals and what children and elementary school age children need in terms of nutrition, we got to talk about how many folks will lose access to school meals if you cut SNAP and Medicaid. So there's ways like that they could kind of bring up certain things, whether again, committee hearings, floor, speeches on the floor, and also the work that they do back home. So Democrats or Republicans can be, talking about this in their local media. They can be doing events that get media attention locally or putting out pieces, an op-ed in the big local paper or anything like that, that then is read by constituents of the nearby congressional district or even another state. So they can be doing that. And the one last thing I will say, even though I'm talking more about Medicaid on this panel, House Democrats in particular, and Senate Democrats too, it feels like they're a little bit falling over themselves right now to talk about healthcare and Medicaid. They are actually lifting it up a lot, at least in certain ways. But one of the things that we are very concerned about is they are not talking that much about actually what's at stake for SNAP. The House Democrats, and this is very partisan, it's not like something we endorse, but just as an FYI, this past week they had like a day of action and they were doing social media and putting out statements or whatever. They have not done anything like that on SNAP, even though there's a lot at stake in terms of permanent structural changes to the SNAP program. So that's one other specific ask that you could make of Democratic policymakers is, in a lot of cases, maybe they're talking about Medicaid, but we need them talking about kind of the full package and what's at stake there. So those are a couple ideas.
Bob, do you have a response?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. Meredith really nailed it, but I will say, we often go in with a thank you. We realize on the Democrat side that, they're pretty much lock in step on the hunger issues, on SNAP, on WIC, on Medicaid, and just to thank them for what they're doing. And I'll often start with a little joke, we know that you're with us 100%, but we still want to talk about these issues with you because they may be new staff. And so younger staff, and they need to hear from you. They need to hear your story and why you're there and what you're sharing on SNAP and Medicaid. So you're educating them too, which is important to remember because they might just be out of college, some of these folks that you're meeting with, and they're learning on the issues. And so you're helping to build up their talking points when they're in various meetings or advising their bosses, the either senator or the House member. And I think the other thing is helping them. Yeah, that's more for us. I was going to say helping them to focus on issues, but we do a lot of that. But I think just encouraging them in the work that they're doing and saying if there's anything, asking, because you can bring it back to Catherine or the FCNL folks. Is there anything that you need in your toolbox to help, educate or help talk more on these issues? And that's always helpful too.
Yeah. And now that we've prepared for what you should do, what shouldn't you do? We can either break it up by partisan or we can just do in general what not to do in meetings. I guess Meredith can go first.
I want to give you a real example. So earlier you heard me talk about the racist history of work reporting requirements and the reason why that policy is in place. That's a message I will not use with a more conservative office on Capitol Hill. Like, I think that one of the things is to be very aware of who the audience is. And I'm not saying I don't want you to be fake. I don't want you to not talk about what's important to you. But I think kind of being aware of how to approach things and how to connect with policymakers on a kind of a set of shared values based on who you're speaking with. So that's one example. And I know it's hard because I don't want you to compromise your values to whoever you're speaking with. I think in some ways, I think one of the mistakes that often we make, which sometimes we get nervous or we're like, man, I really want to make this point because I am fired up about it. And one of the things we make a mistake of doing is talking too much and kind of talking at them rather than really asking questions, listening, engaging, and really kind of being in conversation and using it as a way to develop or further a relationship. One other mistake, by the way, is not following up afterwards. And you've got amazing FCNL staff who can kind of support you and that sort of thing. But those are some thoughts on kind of what to say and not to say. One of them is just don't say too much, especially if you're not really listening.
And yeah, I would say common sense rules the day and how you approach things. If you're thinking in your head, I probably shouldn't say that, you probably shouldn't say that. And I know your generation is pretty kind in how you deal with things. But the other thing I will say, yeah, be passionate, be passionate. And don't be worried about showing your passion because that's why you're here, and we need that passion on the Hill. But just be careful with your tone of you guys, or you did this, you did that, because that just closes off conversations. I think you all probably know that pretty well. So that's the big thing. And I just say, look for common ground. And a great way to start off is saying, where did you go to college, or what town are you from? And then that just opens things up. It really does.
Thank you for that. I may have jumped the gun with this question, but what about offices that we've said have been vocal or are engaged with the Medicaid and SNAP cut debate? What should people say when they go into offices I support you, but there's nothing that I can do? So what can our future lobbyists know what to do?
I think one of the things to do is then ask, well, tell me how you're engaging with this already. Is the representative or the senator, weighing in with leadership? And to be frank, this is, I think y'all probably got some of this already. Reconciliation bills are basically written by the majority party. So this is more for those of you who hear from Republicans like, oh, we're already, we're protecting Medicaid, we're trying to protect SNAP, whatever. They're more apt to say it to you on Medicaid than SNAP, but and say, great, well, tell me more what you're doing already. Have you communicated with leadership? Are you engaging your peers? Have you talked to the committee? What are you telling them? And are you saying that you won't support a package that includes any Medicaid cuts? Are you telling them that there's certain things that you're willing to support and what you're not? So I think there's ask a lot of questions if you hear that from them. And then you can also give them ideas of other things that they could be doing. So I gave you the example about, sounding the alarm in the media or in congressional hearings or other things that they're doing. That's another oh, great. Maybe you and I could do an op-ed together for the local paper about how important Medicaid and SNAP are to the community. And, you can kind of throw out ideas or ask them, and you don't have to come with here's my menu of 47 things that you should be doing. You could be like, great, what else could you, how can I support you so that your position is really clear with voters back home, and have them come up with some ideas. So I think those are some things that you could kind of toy with in offices. But again, it's a lot about listening and asking questions. But it's always good to have a few ideas in your back pocket.
Yeah, Meredith nailed it. I mean, I think there's always more to do. I mean, we don't like it when we hear there's nothing more that we can do because there's always avenues. There's always different things. And one of the things we will always ask is how can we help you? Or a lot of times if we're in Democrat offices, because we work very bipartisan at Brad, we'll get asked to try and work with Republicans and get messaging tidbits from them that we can go back and with. But I think one of the things is you guys are on college campuses all over the country. And so it would be very appropriate for you to ask if the Congress, you get that kind of thing, if you could ask if the congressman might consider coming to speak at your school on hunger issues, or the senator or whoever it is, or a very key staff person, if they're on a committee that's handling nutrition and food issues or tax issues that we work on, or medical issues including Medicaid. That would be a great idea if you would ask if maybe they'd want to come and talk to your campus. And then I'm sure for those of you in student body or whatever, you could find a way to maybe make that happen.
And actually that one, can I just chime in? They can also do a site visit. So Bob mentioned things like local food banks or food pantries or community health center. Those of you that are working, or, my family goes to a community health center. I'd love members of Congress to come see the great work that's happening in our local community health center. So I think there's also come and do what they call a site visit. And Congress has 2 full weeks in the middle of April that they're off. So that's a great opportunity to do some of that.
Yes, that was very important, because Amelia just said in our last panel that the work does not end here Tuesday. And we had questions about what can we do when we go back home. And that is great advice for it. But we've been talking at y'all for a very long time. So I'm going to put in some audience participation. How we did this question before, but who is here is the first time lobbying? Can you raise your hand?
Wow.
And then keep it up or add to it if it's your first time at Spring Lobby Weekend. Okay. So my nice segue into the question, for the many people here that there's first time lobbying or first time at Spring Lobby Weekend, what is your advice for them?
I would reiterate what Bob said. I think that in terms of being kind of young leaders on the Hill, you were particularly well connected, well positioned to connect with staffers. They are often folks, kind of driven because they care about the world. They want to make it a better place. And they're therefore they're they're in a career of public service, and they're often kind of in their 20s. That's off, so you'll be surprised. So I think you can kind of connect at a different level. Another thing I don't know, has anyone seen any of the research from the Congressional Management Foundation? So they do these regular surveys of congressional staff, and one of the questions they've asked over several years is if a member of Congress doesn't have a firm position on an issue, what are the things that make a difference there? What impacts their decision? And by far, the number one thing is visits and information from constituents. Meaning, I can go, and I do go, and we all go up here on stage and meet with congressional offices. But you are the ones who actually really have the power. And there's research to back that up. So I think that's something to keep in mind. There's another tip I want to give you that I got a long time ago from a media training, but it's one I like to throw out every time I'm doing, I'm talking to folks before they go to the Hill. It's ABC. So if you find yourself where you're in a conversation and it's not focused, or you feel like you're kind of stuck in kind of defense or trying to educate them about something, and they're off on a tangent. You're yeah, I'm not here right now to talk about, the Middle East. I'm here to talk about food assistance. Though plenty of us want to talk about the Middle East. I'm not saying that we don't want to do that, but if you, or I'm not interested in, how the local university is doing in March Madness right now. I'm here. I came all the way here because I want to talk to you about access to health and food assistance. So ABC is you acknowledge oh, I'm so glad you also care about our local universities and schools back home. Then B is you bridge. C is core message. So remember what that core message is, and you can kind of use it and speaking of education, that's actually part of why I'm here, is because I know firsthand that access to healthcare and food is really important for our ability to learn and grow. And that's why I'm here to talk to you about SNAP and Medicaid. So that's that ABC, acknowledge, bridge, back to core message. That's one thing to have in your toolkit, because often they want to take the conversation can go off on a tangent and you want to bring it back. So it's from a media training, but it works great on the Hill, honestly.
Bob, do you have a response too?
I do. So you guys are already at advantage, because I think if you have any member of Congress meetings, they love meeting with college students. You're going to make their day. They're tired of seeing people like us all day long. And so they got a group of 20 kids outside waiting to talk with them. That's already putting them in a good mood. We just had a group of 20 kids from Pennsylvania meeting with chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Glenn Thompson, and they got a great meeting with him. And we can never get in to see him, so I'm glad the college kids can. So you have a big advantage there, I think, in a lot of ways. And then like I said before, just tell your stories and be excited about why you're there. You're there to help people, and that's a really great thing. And then the last thing I'm going to say, and Meredith has already said this as well, that your power is that you're a voter. And I know some of you will be going into offices where you're actually a constituent, where you're voting in that district. If it's a House member, very specific. If it's a senator, of course, they represent the whole state. But you're a constituent, and they're there because they're working for the people. At least they're supposed to be. So your voice is very important to that area. I think that's the last thing I'm gonna say is, but just realize, I wanted to tell a little story quick. What really affects my ego all the time is we can be working on an issue here in Washington for 10 years and not get a yes from a member of Congress. But people from the local state go in, and whether it's a letter we want them to sign or to get on a piece of legislation, and they walk out of the meeting and the member says yes. And we're like, we worked on that for 5 years. But the good news is that's the way it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be constituents influencing the members of Congress. So you got a lot of power there too, is all I'll say.
Yes, you both have given us such a wealth of knowledge about building bipartisan support. Are there any final comments before we move on to our Q&A?
I have one more tip I meant to say already. We were just chatting about it before the meeting started. When you walk in that office and you're like, because, and they're like, who are you supposed to meet with? You kind of right away say, we're supposed to meet with I'm supposed to meet with Catherine at 11:30, but is the representative here? We'd love to take a picture together. Or is the senator around? Would love to say hi and thank you. That is a great way. And then you're ready with that like elevator pitch and results. We always called it your laser talk, like your quick, powerful thing the case that you can make directly with policymaker, because Bob is totally right. You can work on something as an advocate for a long time, but it's only when you get the ear of the member themselves, and they love taking pictures. So that's one other thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Another thing is you might get asked questions. It's okay to not be an expert. You're an expert on your lived experience. You're an expert on the needs of your community. You're an expert and a moral authority on why you believe the things you believe. And let me tell you, it is great if you find yourself saying, I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. Because then you're setting yourself up to be a resource. So don't worry if you don't know all the stats. There's plenty of people like me who can send them some stats. But what you can do is build that relationship, and it's actually a great excuse to kind of keep up the conversation if you get asked a question. So don't freak out if that happens. Don't feel like you need to know everything.
Nothing to add.
Okay, perfect. So I guess we move to our Q&A portions. Anybody? I'll do the sweeping motions. Sorry, my eyes went over here first.
Yeah, look at that. You're all right.
Hi, Bailey DeShong again. And I'm with Agnes Scott from Georgia. So a lot of stuff, what I've been seeing in news outlets, particularly in regards to what the House ended up voting on, was that some of the Democrats were saying that we would rather, and they voted with the Republicans because they're like, we would rather them have this inch instead of giving them a mile if the government were to shut down. So what would it look like if the government were to shut down? Like, how detrimental would that be if we continue to drag this on instead of giving Trump what he wants?
All right. So there's two. So the legislative package that where they are looking at these big changes to Medicaid and SNAP is this budget reconciliation package. So that's, you want them to say no, you want them to no cuts to Medicaid or SNAP and budget reconciliation. Budget reconciliation, the House has put, kind of past their initial kind of blueprint to pave the way for it. They did that actually on a party line vote. One Republican voted against it, but that's actually separate from the thing that just happened with the potential government shutdown. So the legislation, they kept, that ended up passing the House and Senate like 9 days ago, 10, whatever that was. That was to that wasn't actually related to Medicaid and SNAP. And in his shutdown, Medicaid and SNAP benefits, because they actually don't go through that process, the same Medicaid and SNAP benefits would have just kept on going. But the staff who administer those programs, that there could have been, that's a place where there could have been some overtime in particular, if folks are newly eligible because there's a natural disaster like a hurricane, they couldn't get qualified or, something like that. But that's different from there's other programs that very much would be impacted in a shutdown, whether it's at least over time, WIC, Head Start, housing assistance. Those go through the funding bills that Congress just passed and some Democrats voted for. And if, at least not necessarily on day one, but over time, that's those programs would no longer be funded if we were in a shutdown. And a quick aside, this is not related to your core ask, but I'll note that in some ways we're already kind of in a shutdown. Like there's a lot of clawing back of funding that is happening in federal government right now. The latest news just in the last couple of days is around the Department of Education and civil rights enforcement, for instance, for students with disabilities. That's already getting kind of shut down anyway. So it's not kind of either you're in a shutdown or you're not in a shutdown. We're in this like weird thing because of what's happening in the federal government right now, where a lot of both the workers and the funding in a variety of agencies is getting kind of clawed back.
Yeah, just so what we did before the break, we explained, which no fault for getting them confused because I have a Venn diagram from when I first started about the difference between everything. We're focused on budget reconciliation. That is the two-step process where you have the budget resolution, which is like the outline of what are the numbers they're going to cut and from what committee. And then step two, we talked about is execution, where committees go in and say, make up their bills, everything gets put together and that gets passed on the floor. That's where the core ask is fit. And where you are right now is they need to make a joint budget resolution because it has to pass both the House and the Senate. So that's where we are in this moment. But I appreciate your question. Do you have anything to add to it?
I just want to add, that's a really astute question, like really smart of you to ask that because that was a big issue. And if you want to learn more, read editorials, maybe, opinion pieces, and go like broad spectrum. We do like Washington Post and The Hill or Wall Street Journal, and just read, different folks are saying. That's how I educate myself on the issues. And we could go into politics all day long on that. So
yes. Do you have, I see right in the middle with the mask, black jacket.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm from Voting Access for All, and I'm here with Michigan United. You were saying the lady in the middle was saying to follow up after the lobby visit. So could you give an example of how do we particularly follow up after we're done lobbying?
Great. Well, Catherine, I'm happy if you want to say anything about materials that you all provide afterwards. Okay, so a couple things. Just like your grandma wants you to, you should probably send a thank you note. An email is fine, but like you can get their email address. They have business cards. You can find out up front, like, thank you so much. You could also say, just to reiterate, really appreciated our time and, no cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and budget reconciliation. Or you could send more, here's information about, needs in the community, that sort of thing. So like a thank you, but you can kind of include some of that. Again, you could follow up with like hey, we'd love to see the senator, invite the senator to come to our community organization or to our campus or that sort of thing. That's another example of a follow-up. Another thing you might be ready to do is, you might find yourself talking and in the front of the meeting. I always like, in addition to like, are you from the district? Another question I like to ask at the beginning is, what issues do you handle for the representative or senator? And it might be that you're talking to the aide who handles health and Medicaid, but they're actually not the one, they're taking notes to pass on to a colleague, but they're not the one who handles SNAP. So another follow-up is you're directly contacting or you're the person and you're CCing the aide you met to be like, hey, I got a chance to meet your colleague to talk more about SNAP, but I wanted to give you this information about why we are concerned about cuts to food assistance. That's another form of follow-up. It's like go follow up with the other people who handle those issues that you might not have even connected with. So those are a couple of things, and an obvious Coalition on Human Needs can definitely help you with some of the templates, but I bet these guys got it covered.
Yeah, I always love a little hyperlink in my emails with resources. So I'm pretty sure we have at the registration table some more resources about specific data that you can include in your follow-up if you would like to. Yeah. Okay. Next question. I see in the back corner making a sweeping motion, as Larissa said.
Thank you. Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I think it might be a two-part question, but I know we are here to rally for stopping the cuts. But I'm from Baltimore, and like two at the dentist, and she got a phone call, and she said we no longer take Medicaid. So this has been happening. My son's therapist stopped. My granddaughter's pediatrician stopped. So people are already feeling the effects of the cut that has not happened yet. So how do you suggest when we go to meet with these congressmen that we address it or get them to see that, yes, it's going to impact if you cut, but the impact has already started?
I just, this is Meredith Ballywick on Medicaid, so I'm going to, let her primarily answer that. But I think is just number one, the office is hearing from you on that. When the threats of domestic cuts by one of the executive orders by the president first happened like a month ago, there were a number of us, I don't know if Amelia's in the room somewhere, I think. We were actually in the room with the senator, and then it was Meals on Wheels that we were getting a lot of calls about. That folks were very concerned about. And so number one is making them aware that, wow, you were in that dental office and you're already hearing about that and raising the flag that, folks are concerned about it and they think it's already affecting them is what I would do, because we got a lot of feedback in that office. We're like, oh my gosh, our phone's been ringing off the hook. That's all that we're dealing with right now.
And then the other thing is sometimes that's not actually, for instance, the lack of access to dental care for dental services and Medicaid. That's actually not because these cuts are coming down the pike. That's actually because the system's not working already. Like it's not like the status quo. It's incredibly frustrating to be trying to stop things from getting worse and stopping further harms when reality, like accessing quality, affordable health care is still a big issue, and health costs are a big problem. That was one of the things that voters theoretically were telling policymakers in the election is we got to do more to help with everyday costs of like things like healthcare and food. And instead we're trying, so I get that and so it's actually the dental coverage getting clawed back is actually not because they know these Medicaid cuts are coming down the pike. It's actually because systems are already kind of broken. And that's not, we need to have a vision of where everyone gets the health coverage they need and the health services. And that includes things like dental and mental health, et cetera. And that's actually not in our system. I mean, plenty of you could argue successfully the system's working exactly the way it was designed to, which is that it's not serving most people. But either way, it's actually like it's a bigger problem. And it's part of why, even if on Tuesday on Capitol Hill, we're not actually talking about the kinds of investments we want to see or the policies we want to see in our communities, like we need to remember that vision and remind each other about the things that we need to make things better, and that we need to have that kind of vision for making things better while we're playing defense. So unfortunately, it's not that simple. If we stop these cuts, like the minority of places, dental care isn't covered through Medicaid. So we still got to fix that too. So it's a little bit of context there.
Yeah, do you have another? I see plaid shirt was.
Hello. Oh, that's loud. Rojo Hide from Dallas area, Dallas Fort Worth, Oak Cliff. First, I feel like before I ask my question, I must say, in my opinion, healthcare is a human right and food should be free for everybody in America. But sadly, that's not how they feel. In the conversation today, Meredith and Bob, y'all touched on how to build bipartisan support. And I guess my question is, I've done a few of these lobby visits at the state level and now at the federal level with FCNL and their tools. And I've noticed that often the staffer is, if the congressperson does not necessarily is fond of us or doesn't like us, they tend to give us a staffer that doesn't know much. So it's very hard to try to get concrete answers as simple as like, is he supporting this bill? So I guess I wonder, how can we ensure that we walk out of there beyond with the follow-up with a clear commitment, or how do we continue checking on that clear commitment so that we actually know where they stand? Thank you.
That's a really great question, and it doesn't just happen to you. I think when you're doing meetings, we can get the very junior staffer a lot too, or we might take our president in of the organization and think we're meeting with the congressman, and all of a sudden, oh, he had to run to the floor to vote, which is legitimate. It happens, and you get stuck with an LC, and you're a little bit embarrassed for your president. But I think the key is for us, we always have to tell ourselves, well, that person could be a chief of staff in 5 or 6 years. And so we still really need to convey a convenient message, a powerful message to them, and treat them like they are, very important, even though they're really young. I think that's really crucial. And then what we're finding is, I'm going to switch that up a little bit. A lot of times that the staff, because they're around your age, are more supportive of our issues than maybe their bosses. And so we're talking to them to get the boss's ear. And I think a good member of Congress should really be listening to those junior staffers because they have a unique perspective as well. So I just want to encourage you, don't think just because, that they're not going to convey a really important message, although it feels very frustrating to you at this time.
Just 2 quick things to add. Bob's last point, they can kind of be your lobbyist on the inside. If you get them on board, and that's why that kind of checking back in with them, oh, have you gotten a chance to talk to the boss about it? Is the boss gotten it, to the question of follow up a little of a couple of weeks later, you're like, hey, I saw this article about the demand at food banks going up and, thought you might want to see this, or, about what's happening with access to dental services at our local health centers. So I think you've got a chance, that helps them become your lobbyists on the inside. And then also they might not actually know, because things are kind of up in the air. You've got the House kind of putting forward this blueprint. The Senate is trying to figure out, where their priorities are, and they're actually trying to pull it together. They might not be hiding it from you. It's actually, they don't know. And maybe only a few folks are going to know, at least for a while, because they're going to be kind of what is likely to happen is there's kind of behind the scenes conversations that often just the senators and representatives are involved in. And it's going to be like a backroom deal that comes up with this kind of joint resolution that they'll move. So they might not be just giving you a line that they don't know, especially right now. They actually don't know.
I feel like I've neglected this side, and I saw somebody's hand pop up immediately in the very back row.
Thank you so much. I was gonna ask, these staffers are trained to act politic. You know, they know how to speak, they know how to interrupt. You know, especially people who are gonna be lobbying for the first time. I want you guys to answer this question so you can help them to feel more, you know, confident in their meetings. How can you talk about your story and share everything you want to share? Of course, you're not going to share everything you want to share because there's small time, but I want to make sure that that you can be effective. How can you talk about what you need to talk about, not getting interrupted by staffers or senators or Congress? Thank you.
I do think it's like one of the things to be ready for is to have your kind of what's it sound like in 30 seconds, your story or your ask. Be really ready for that because again, whether it's a photo op or they're coming in and out of the office because they're going to vote, then you can hopefully get to a more, the kind of most senior level person, ideally the senator or representative. So that's one thing is like you might not have a lot of time. So having it really prepared in like a concise way. And that's why, kind of when, again, that core message of ABC, like what's the thing that's like bottom line that I want to bring forward in any conversation. And then I think you can ask like, what, how does your office handle, relaying information from, the conversation that we had today? How do I find out, if my concerns have been relayed to the senator or representative? Which is different because you're part of what the frustration is you feel like you might not be talking to the right person, but you can ask them like, what are you going to do to make sure that the right person hears what I had to say? So those are a couple ideas, but maybe Bob has more.
Just very practical before you go into the meeting, and I know FCNL will have you guys very well organized, but is, you know who your group leader is, and then typically you do the introductions and go around the table. It sounds silly, but just talking about that a little bit beforehand and being ready as a group. So when you go in, you go around the table and you can each share a little bit of that story that you asked about.
Yes, and Bob touched on this where tomorrow, you'll be doing your lobby training. So you will get concise with who's going to be the note taker, who's going to be the group leader. You will practice it multiple times. You will time it so everything can fit concise. You can get all the information in basically one power pack before you go into your Hill meeting. I haven't got my 5 minutes. Yes. Very front for the next question. And then I'll go right there.
So I actually have had a follow-up to that. I am from Agnes Scott. My name's Rory, but I'm going alone to an individual district. I'm going and lobbying Mike Collins. So with that, I have like 3 questions. So first, tips for going alone when you do not have a group. I'm confident going alone, would just love to have some insight to that. And Mike Collins is notoriously stubborn, and any tips for particularly stubborn representatives? And then lastly, do you have any tips for people who are visibly different than a normal person? Like I have my crutch and that is visible and sometimes garners people not taking me seriously. And there are other examples of that people may have. So what are some tips for people who are in these marginalized groups and commonly discriminated against when talking?
Okay. Going alone. I think if anything, what it gives you even more is like, you know what? I'm just here. I'm like, it almost kind of put away notes and talking points because you're the one who's has to like kind of be in the conversation. So then you really focus in on, just connecting with them and asking lots of questions. And I think if anything, it just kind of reminds you like my goal is that I'm a human connecting to another human and, finding out, more about them and what their concerns are. And, the thing that is hard is you can't be there like, oh, they said this and I should talk about it this way next time. Like, but so maybe there's a way as soon as you walk out, you like voice dictate a note to yourself so you don't forget it or something like that. But yeah, and I mean there might be, but I'm not in position for FCNL to help you with this. But there might be somebody who like ends up being free, and you can kind of find each other, and somebody who come literally just to take notes, so then you don't have to do that. And I saw some nodding from Amelia, so there's probably some time like tomorrow to get some help with that. Yeah, to be frank, based on identities, like for instance, when I was at results, like there were folks that did not feel comfortable, especially alone, going into certain offices based on their identity. They might be, from an immigrant or mixed status family, or they themselves, are kind of worried, especially in the attacks right now on immigrants, or, and I am really glad that you came all this way. And I think in a lot of, there is kind of strength in numbers when you feel like your identity, like having a team of folks go in with you is an advantage, not just to have note takers, but actually folks who kind of stand and support you and help take care of you and that sort of thing. And again, I think there's probably capacity. I mean, honestly, like I'll move some things around in my calendar and come and hang out with you on Tuesday if it needed. So, and I bet there's like a room full of people who are game to do that for you. So, but I also think it's okay. There might be certain conversations with certain folks that you might not feel comfortable in that space. I don't think that our advocacy should actually put us at personal risk of kind of anyway. So this is a tough time. I just want to acknowledge that. And then on the maybe you want to take the stubborn side.
Yeah, I assume it's a staff person? Yeah, okay. So it's always good if you know them beforehand and then you have that. But I think those meetings are always more conversational if you do and you're meeting for first time. And I'm sorry you feel that way about being unseen sometimes, or that they're looking at you a different way. But just go in and know you're you and you're awesome and you're Wonder Woman and you got this. But it's always great to grab somebody with you too, to go alone. I've met once alone with a congressman when I was very junior, and that became really awkward really fast because I came out, I ran out of things to share with the congressman. So I would just encourage you that if you feel uncomfortable, take somebody with you. It'd be great. I think you also said it's in district, right? Yeah. So find a buddy.
Yes, and if you're still uncomfortable, we will work with you to fix everything and make sure you're accommodated for everything. I'm not getting my time mark yet. So in the back corner, white shirt, pretty necklace. It is pretty.
Great eyes.
Hi, my name's Aya. I'm from Ames Friends from Iowa, and I was just wondering how you guys combat statistical misinformation that could be present. I know we come from a state that likes to take statistics out of context to support their biases. So I was just wondering how you guys want us to combat that in a meeting or other places. Thank you.
Yeah. Are you providing statistics or things to share?
I'm getting ahead. Yes, yes. Oh, the roadmap, the lobby roadmap. The leave behind. Yeah. So the 70 million people on Medicaid, 40 million people on SNAP, all of those statistics will be on the one-page document that's in the nice little folder that everybody has worked so hard to provide. But do you have anything specifically to add?
So, I mean, I always, we have a lot of data that we use at Bread for the World. Ours are like hunger statistics, and we use them as, these are well researched. These are the numbers that we know about. I'm kind of blanking on a specific. I mean, I'm thinking international right now, but I just would, be confident in what you're getting provided. And if they have questions about that you can always have a staff person follow up with them. And that would be a great way to combat anything you feel you're getting as unhelpful rhetoric. Yeah.
I do think I've been in meetings where, and sometimes this is more savvy congressional staff, where they want to see where your stats are coming from. And so I think when you're kind of using government data, maybe even data from a more conservative think tank or from a university, that actually sometimes it matters versus if it's from even though a lot of them are members of the Coalition on Human Needs, sometimes having a more progressive think tank be the folks who give us our numbers. Sometimes congressional staff will notice that. So I actually, in particular, when I'm sharing data with more conservative offices, I'll actually be very deliberate about making sure that kind of how can I get this data and share this data? So, for example, right now, like the House Budget Committee Democrats have these amazing fact sheets about how many folks are at risk of losing Medicaid and SNAP. And it's all in one place and it's even nicely formatted. I am not sending that. I've not sent that to a single Republican office, even though it's nicely formatted and all the stuff, because they actually it would discredit. And instead, I'm sending them to the USDA number of how many SNAP participants are in their congressional district instead of using the more kind of handy tool that exists because it's seen as partisan. But actually, I think here, I'm going to do this ABC thing again. I'm really into this ABC thing. So instead be like, oh, well, I hear that you have some concerns about the data. I'm not an expert on data. Instead, what I actually can really tell you about is the needs back home in the community. This is what I'm seeing on the ground. These are the lines I'm seeing at the local food bank. This is what I'm seeing in the work that I'm doing in my community. This is the experience that my family or others are having, putting food on the table or accessing healthcare. That, that's what I know. I don't know about the data. I know about the real life thing back home. So that's like an ABC of I've acknowledged, like, you got concerns about this data. That's not why I'm here. My core message is I know that these programs matter to folks back home. So
Yeah, well, that was a great note to end off on. We have another round of applause for Meredith and Val. Yeah.
I'm just gonna make a quick announcement. Thank y'all so much. You can head off the stage if you want. Okay, wait. No one move. No one move. I have an announcement. So just a reminder that caucus groups are meeting now during lunch. Caucus groups are mostly downstairs. So if you are joining a caucus group, there's food downstairs and the rooms are also downstairs. They're labeled. The only caucus group up here is the white accountability group, which is going to be over there. If you are not joining a caucus group, please eat in the crystal ballroom, which is that big ballroom over there. So if you are not attending a caucus group, please eat in the crystal ballroom. Besides that, go to the appropriate room. We're back here at 1:30. Thank you. the FCNL staff member to be a really specific person, and so can you be that person? ISIS has that information. I'll have her team. Is it a member of Congress? Yes, it is. We're doing a version of lobbying executive and a version of lobbying. I know. That's why I'm like, Amelia's doing it. So ISIS will message the team's trying to do that. Okay, cool. Thanks, Amelia.
Are you going to go? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a private I just wanted to say thank you for discussing it's something that's yeah, like I yesterday, when it was brought up how a lot of funding for in public schools is Medicaid, and I did a co-curriculum when I was in public school, and like would not just do and like at this time and I just got called because
So I didn't know if I should have asked that any questions, but I
But instead
access to benefits or, you know, kind of you don't get your SNAP benefits kind of being option to get these that instead you have this option right now kind of like having to be like kind of like a code of like you make $1 more and you lose it. States right now have this option. I guess Congress of like kind of making it be yeah. But that doesn't mean it's I'm just saying that unfortunately that's an example of where yeah.
So I don't know necessarily how it would probably only if you have a two-parent household. So,
They say that you literally have to have a two-parent household to get
yeah, because it's either either
or like
or.
also
Like
from
you
like
can't,
domestic violence and sexual assault thing. That's safe.
right? Because you can't just okay. The mother lives with the kids and the father on the other side of town. So if he wants to say, I need to get a car, it's for us as a family. Oh, you have to be in the same household as them. You can't just get it thinking you're going to just be in the household. And then they also be calling and checking in like every so often, whenever to see the status or what's going on. And I don't know, you be so hesitant for you to even say the right thing to them because they say, okay, yeah, you don't qualify. So yeah, they cover that, they take $50 off when you hit the capacity at the borderline where you make too much. They take $50 off, $200 is the basic standard of you just taking care of yourself.
And one of the things overall, again, this is not solving it, it's not making it getting worse, is like in some places, states are, right now states can use like waivers and optional authorities to address some of these things, and make it so that for instance, you're not pulled off or for instance, like community-based services for people with disabilities, so you can be that's an option for states, it's not mandated for them to cover that. And so it cuts. And same with some of these other things around like SNAP benefits, it's kind of easing it and making it so it's not a cliff. If you cut hundreds of millions of dollars and you're like, states, you can, sorry, we're just yanking back a bunch of money and making you in charge. The states are going to cut all the optional things and make all this, even the places where there are some, like if states are doing something good things in some places to make it not as bad, it's going to get worse. And then it'll be like, Congress will be like, oh, it's not our fault.
Oh yeah, I did.
So I was just my first time, and I'm kind of curious to I'm a huge advocate for healthcare for policy. I just don't know how it organization. It's huge change. But this is a risk and we just don't know. I'm just scared like when they die already.
Okay, great.
Okay, yes, ma'am. I'd love to be a part of it.
They might be right outside but they don't do that. They are like, if anything, they want to talk about your story policy.
Yeah, so it's right outside Atlanta, we're kind of like, you know, it's a women's college. Yeah, yeah. I have not, but graduating. And so I told wait after school is what I no, graduating. After like there's conference. I don't know. So for the first little bit after graduation. But yeah,
Sure. I love this. What school do you go to?
okay, yeah, was hearing you talk about the intersection of international relations and how we use that as a tool to advance national, like, my sister played Elspeth Frisbee. It's so
Actually, they played the Carolina Friends this morning. I was like, I was hanging out with Quakers all day. Look at me.
It's a fun thing.
Yeah, it's a great vibe. Actually, it's they're very supportive of each other.
Elisa, thank you so much.
I think that was already fixed up.
Yeah. Oh, good. My internship over the summer actually did a bit of good. It was desert areas. It was well, it was the mayor's office of national affairs, and once a week we would do a free time in that was in a
Thank you. That was perfect.
yeah,
They're doing, yeah,
a really great experience. Yes, because there was also that club inside of that office as well.
They'll do it for you. Take my word for it. That was so great.
I will reach out on your
What are you doing? There's a dining hall on the other side. No, on the other side of the hall. All the way down that way.
Or college gave us fancy name tags.
Because I had to tell you guys.
Great meeting.
Right here, this one.
Wow. Thank you, Bob. That was so good. I was saying, the two of you. I actually think like this is we're not probably.
Cuatro. Cheers.
Great job. No worries. This is for you. If you're talking to people who for things that work with volunteers.
There are a few times I had to go to other college. That's too deep. No.
Yay, well, good luck. Yeah, we'll hear. Yeah. And if I could be, need help on it, no. I think I missed that she said it was actually kind of. I didn't think she could. Well, either one. Yeah. Okay. Great school. Yeah. I feel like I have things that.
I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, bye. I will also follow up with you. I'm going to follow up with you about it.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to follow up.
Okay.
I feel like I have a list. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
You too. Like what we hired to like run it, so it'd be like. Yeah. Yeah. So there are multiple things that are supporting.
Colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And public
Tomorrow is the
coordinating,
two.
drafting, you know, like the kind of stuff that.
Tomorrow too?
Like we want to talk about.
Thank you guys.
And then
Tomorrow morning, we have how many? Adult, it's okay. Only for adult. Only for is okay. Two. Tomorrow is two. Tomorrow, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dollar. So we need a. Yes, we do. One, okay. Yes. There you go. Thank you, Dollar. Okay. You can go already, no? There you go. Yeah, what happened to your guy? They forget the books? What happened to them?
They forgot the box. Thank you.
Okay, okay. You good?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I want a little separation from this one. Do you mind if we slide these this way?
Oh, okay, go. You need separate?
Yeah, so it's like three together and then
One here?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or actually, this is good. Yeah, let's leave it like this, and then these three are together.
Yeah. You want to separate?
Yeah, so someone's kind of on their own, and then
Ajit, give me one with a fish.
yes, sir. Perfect.
This one here.
Yeah, that's great.
Here, I have here, door. Inside for them. I have door.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Tomorrow we put two.
Yes, two. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Ajit, they can't push from our table room, okay? When you bring, they can't push. Okay. Keyboard, no? Keyboard, yeah. Yeah, that's not a problem. And you guys, you know what's from? What?